Hi, it's Amanda. Welcome back to my May update for my Pan That palette. And this year I'm actually using 3 palettes. The main theme is fun sized. I'm using this Boots Easy on the Eye palette. The first shade is Twilight Blue. I have lost the initial footage for this one, but I used it 2 times for the first time this year in May, and there's very little to show for it at the moment. The next one along is Cocoa Brown, and I haven't used this one in March and April, so the last time I updated you on it was in February when I'd had 4 uses. I used it 16 times in May, giving me 35 uses in total, and starting to get a decent dip on this one. Next up we have Smoky Marble. I used that one in April 7 times. And I used it just the one more time in May, which means there's not much of a difference to show on this one. Next up we have Wild Khaki. I had just used it once in April. But in May I used it another 5 times, making 6 in total. This one is going quite quickly for the number of times I've used it. It is quite sort of chalky and powdery. Next one we have is Cool Aluminium. I had 17 uses on it at the April update, and I'd hit pan. And I used it another 3 times in May, expanding that pan just a little bit. And the last one on this row is Illuminated Bronze. I don't like this one very much. I only used it once in April, and I used it another time in May, but you can see just how easily these sort of creamy formulas tend to go. So I'll keep working on it slowly and occasionally. It's not the one that I like to reach for though. Moving down to the next row, we've got Onyx Black. I had used this one 19 times in April, with 59 uses in total at that point. Been using this one fairly consistently, and I used it another 19 times in May, making 78 uses in total, and I think you can see a slight expansion of the pan on this one. Next is Slate Grey. I'd used that twice in April, just kind of disturbing the surface on this one. I used it another 7 times in May, which makes 15 uses in total, and I'm starting to get a little tiny dip in this one. Next is Cloudy Lilac. I used that quite a lot in April, and I had hit pan on it. I used it another 19 times in May, expanding that pan, making 78 uses on this one in total this year. And then we have Warm Ivory. In April I'd used it 14 times, making 47 uses in total. And in May I used it further 18 times, and I hit pan at 62 uses. I knew that I was going to hit pan at some point soon with this one. I'm just surprised it wasn't a little bit earlier. Next up we have Pink Flush. I used this one twice in April, and I used it another 18 times in May, which means that pan has expanded quite a lot. I am starting to get worried though about whether I'm going to finish this palette or any of the shades by the end of the year, as this is my most used shade, and you can see there's still quite a lot left. Anyway, here's all of the progress that I've made so far on this palette this year. The next palette I'm working on is a Milani palette for Better Together, which is a palette that complements your main Pan That palette. And this one is the Must Have Neutrals palette. The first shade is called Base. In April I had used it 19 times and I had hit pan. In May I used it another 18 times and you can see I have expanded that pan. Considering how big the pan is on this, I think I'm doing pretty well. As these are a bit more difficult to see in the video footage, I have included individual updates for each of the pans, and here you can really see that progress that I've made in the last month. The next one is called Contour. I had used it 14 times in April. In May, just another 6 uses, and I can't really tell any difference in this one. Even when I look at the update photos, I find it difficult to really see a little bit of difference in appearance of the surface, but no clear dip on this one yet. Next up, we've got the shade called Lid, and this looks so pretty in the palette, but on the eye it really doesn't translate at all. I had used it twice in April, I used it one more time in May, and maybe a tiny little bit of a dip starting on this one, but not very much. And I don't think you can see much of a difference on these update photos either. The next one is called Crease. I use this one pretty consistently because I use it in my eyebrows, and that in April I had used it 20 times, and in May I used it another 18 times, and I think you can see that the pan is starting to extend downwards. Probably a bit easier to see that change in these update photos. Then we have the shade called Speciality. I had used this 7 times in April and discovered I actually quite like this one. That was the first time that I had used it. And in May I used it another 18 times, making 25 uses in total, and we've got a decent dip going on this one, so that should be good incentive to continue using it. And as I'd only used it for 2 months, just the 2 update photos for this one. And then finally in this palette we have Liner. This is the black shade. I have been using it a lot, but you don't need much of it, so there's barely anything to show for it. I used it a further 13 times in May, making 71 uses in total. You can see a little mini dip there, but I can't see any clear progress from one month to the other, but I think you can see it from the beginning of the year until now. And then finally, I have been continuing to use my Pan That palette from last year, really only focusing on this shade, Love Letter. In April I'd used it another 17 times, making 51 uses this year and 154 in total. And in May I used it another 18 times, making 69 this year. Didn't quite manage to hit that pan at the bottom, but I'm getting very, very close, and I'm pretty sure I'll manage that by the next update. So here's a little montage of all of the progress made so far this year on this particular shade. And I have used a few of the other shades on and off, mainly warm taupe, and so here's the update for the whole palette. So I hope you've enjoyed this update for my Pan That palette. If you have, why not consider a like and subscribe, and I hope I'll see you in another one of my videos. Bye!